Good morning, I'm Cathy Wagner, Director of Horticulture, and today I wanted to share with you some tips on dividing perennials. So if you have, like I have here, a nice big swath, these are leucanthemum, Shasta daisies. You can see they are just super fat and happy here, and the way that they grow, sending up one stalk at a time from some fibrous roots, makes them very easy to divide. So if you have something like this that is so plentiful in your yard, I don't want you to feel afraid of digging in there, dividing them, moving around, and sharing them. When you're looking at the whole clump, kind of think about where do you want to keep your plants and where is the best place to pull from. So because I have this large buddleia here and the daisies growing under it, I'm going to take some from right here on the edge. Nice little clump. They're a little bit shorter than the rest that are kind of elongated. Obviously you want to get to this task as early in the season as you can. You see I'm using this really nice little floral spade. This is one of my favorite tools. It's just the perfect smaller size. You can see it compared to my hand. It's not as big as a full-size spade. It gets right in there, easily takes off little clumps. It's great for planting quart-size or gallon-size perennials. So if I'm going to try to take out this clump right here, I'm going to cut around it on all sides first before I really try to pop it up. You see I'm giving it a little bit of space around the roots. And be aware that sometimes some of your the edge of your clump might not make it, but you will be able to get several good divisions out of this clump. Now this one happens to be sort of on its own, but don't be afraid to take your shovel and just stick it right in the middle of a clump like this. You can even take out, take what I would call like a plug. Like if you want to take out a small section here, just take that out, fill it with soil, and then you really won't even miss it at all through the rest of the season. So I'm going to take this and just pop it up. You can see it comes out in this nice big mass, which I can set aside. And when we're looking at it, you'll see the roots actually aren't even all that deep. Here's a little guy right on the edge. It's a nice fibrous root system. Not every perennial grows differently, but if you can find one like yarrow, echinacea is kind of similar. It's got a really fibrous root system. It's very easy to dig up and divide, and then this little plant will grow and propagate in the garden. So let's take a look at how to actually take this clump and break it down into some pieces that are a little bit easier to handle. So I've taken this big clump over to my potting bench. It's nice to get it up off the ground, but you can make do with what you have. What I'm going to do today is actually break this into several small clumps that I'm going to propagate into pots, let them root out a little bit, and then share them with friends. So luckily it's been pretty rainy, so the soil is really soft. And because the roots are so fibrous, you can actually start to break up these clumps by hand, sort of pulling apart to tease the roots. I usually get it started a little bit with my pruners just to make that first little break, and then you can actually just pull it apart, see where it naturally cleaves. Now if you wanted to, you could certainly plant any size clump. I'm trying to get as many shareable pieces out of this as possible, so I'm going to be cutting through some of the roots and dividing it into smaller sections. So here you can see we've got some really nice fibrous roots. I did make a cut where it was a larger root or part of the crown that was connecting it to its neighboring section, but that will be fine. You can see that I've pre-filled my 4.5 inch or 5-inch pot here with some nice potting soil, and I'm going to try to spread the roots out to the outside edges of the pot so it sort of sits around the soil. Make sure the roots are down in my pot, and I'm going to take some more nice loose soil and fill around it, using my fingers to guide the soil into all those air pockets. So just like when you're planting a shrub or a perennial or anything, you want to make sure you fill the air pockets. A little tappa tappa, and then we've got one pot ready to go. And you can see I can actually continue to make, just by sort of feeling my way, pulling where it feels like it wants to come apart. Now from that little clump, I already have 3 clumps ready to go. Got nice roots, my half-filled pot, backfilling with some of this soil. Now you do not need to pot things up into a plastic pot and let them root. You can absolutely just pick these things up from the garden that you've dug up, and I could take this whole clump, I could take half of it, I could take a bunch of little divisions like this, and then start placing them immediately into the garden. This is ready to grow and would be just super happy in the garden. Depending on the variety and how many of the roots you're able to save when you are transplanting, you might notice right away a little bit of transplant shock, a little bit of wiltiness, but just make sure you give regular watering. The roots will start growing before the shoots will start recovering, and then you'll know that your perennial is ready to go. The old adage with perennials is first they crawl, then they walk, then they run. So that's your 3-year wait on a perennial. So the first year you put it in there, it's not going to do a whole lot, but by next year it's really going to start to look like a nice healthy clump, and by the 3rd year you're going to be off and running. So you can see that we've had a lot of success doing transplanting. A lot of times we go directly to the garden, but all of these have been propagated from the garden, from divisions. We've got solidago, yarrow, asters, echinacea, all great pollinator plants, easy to grow and great for your yard. So I hope that you'll get out there and try this transplanting technique. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions along the way, but don't be scared, you can do it. If maybe you have your sights set on some larger plant material going into your landscape this spring, we also want to give you some tips on the proper way to plant trees and shrubs that are grown in a container. First, lay out the plants in the garden where you want them to go. Then use your shovel to mark around the pot about 4 to 6 inches out. That'll give you enough room to excavate a nice large hole with room to backfill around the root zone. Now you can dig the hole out, and you know that it's going to be big enough and in the right spot. Next, when you're removing the plant from the pot, tap it a few times to knock it loose, and then remember that on the top of the pot there's actually a lot of fertilizer, but also a lot of weed seeds. So it's usually best to try to push these into the bottom of the hole before you plant. Next, loosen up the roots. This sends a nice signal to those roots that it's time to grow and root out into the surrounding soil. Check the level. You want to make sure that the plant sits in the soil at about the same level of the surrounding soil, if not a little bit higher. That'll allow for any settling, and you'll know that the plant's still going to be at the right level when you're finished. You can go ahead and backfill with the nice loose soil, breaking up any big clumps with your shovel. And then you can also use the back end of your shovel to actually tamp around the plant, because it's really important to fill any little air pockets. The roots aren't going to want to grow in those air pockets. That's going to lead to dryness when you're trying to get your plant established. It's really important to establish good soil to root contact at this stage. When you need more soil, just keep backfilling in. Remove any rocks that you might find or any big chunks of roots. But you're basically using predominantly the native soil that you found the plant in to plant around it, because ultimately that's where it's going to have to live. You can amend with up to 30% compost, but we generally use the native soil around our new planting.